The Karcsi Identity. Written, directed and performed in 13 episodes by Jesse Rowe.
Chapter 7. The News. Karcsi awoke to the rhythmic clatter of the train tracks beneath him, the soft hum of the engine filling the air. His eyes fluttered open, blinking against the dim light filtering through the window. For a moment, he lay there, disorientated and confused, his mind struggling to make sense of his surroundings. This seemed to be a regular thing now. But as he sat up, a wave of dizziness washed over him, the world spinning in a dizzy blur. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog that clouded his thoughts. Where was he? How had he gotten here? The memories were elusive, slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. He glanced around the train compartment, taking in the cramped space and the rows of empty seats stretching out before him. His heart pounded in his chest, a sense of unease settling over him like a suffocating blanket. He felt like a stranger in his own skin, disconnected from the world around him. Outside the window, the world rushed past in a blur of motion and colour. Snow-capped mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks disappearing into the clouds. Dense forests flashed past, the trees a dark blur against the white landscape. Villages and towns appeared and vanished in the blink of an eye, their inhabitants going about their lives unaware of the turmoil felt within Karcsi's mind. He tried to focus, to piece together the fragments of his memory, but it was like trying to grasp smoke with his bare hands. He couldn't remember who he was or how he ended up on the train. Well, then he looked down at the piece of paper in his hand. He thought to himself, the mustached man, the blonde hair, the suitcase, the borrowed shirt. He looked hard at the page with the 9 faces, 7 crossed out, 1 circled and commented on with an orange dot, and 1 elderly man with no red mark and no dot. He studied them for a while, each face, or as much as he could tell from the faces crossed out. After a few minutes he folded it up, put it into his trousers pocket again. Karcsi pushed himself to his feet and made his way down the narrow aisle of the train carriage. As he walked, he couldn't help but notice the other passengers, and there were many more now. They didn't look suspicious at him. They just looked like they were on their way to work. No one looked at him or even seemed to notice him. For once in his short memory, he genuinely felt safe. But regardless of safety, it was his hunger that he felt most of all. He wandered further, noticing that the mustached man was no longer in his seat, and by the time he reached the buffet car, his heart was pounding uncomfortably in his chest. Karcsi queued for what felt like an eternity, the only sounds of the buffet car being the train's rhythmic jolts and the occasional clatter of utensils. The dim lighting cast long shadows, making the car feel even more confined. When it was finally his turn, he stepped forward hesitantly, his eyes fixed on the menu board above the counter. His stomach growled loudly, but he couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. He ordered a sandwich and an orangina, his voice barely above a whisper. And as he waited for the server to get his food, Karcsi's mind wandered. Didn't know how he was going to pay for it, but hunger had distracted him. The savoury aroma of the grilled sandwiches filled the air, making his stomach rumble even more. Then he noticed the phone of the person in front of him, also waiting for their food. The screen's glow highlighted the person's focused expression. On the screen, in French, it said there was an assassination attempt on the Prime Minister of Bohemia, in a helicopter over the Austrian Alps, and the assassin had escaped. Karcsi blinked, the words blurring for a moment as his mind tried to process them, especially in French. He had just been to the Austrian Alps, and hadn't heard of any of that. It made him laugh a little. Crazy person to try and kill someone in a helicopter, he thought. But then he saw a picture of the Prime Minister of Bohemia, holding up an orange armband and a knife with blood on it. The Prime Minister's face looked familiar. From the list of people. This man was circled, not crossed out. He was the not crossed out man. The comment below the photo explained that the assassin had been hiding under the seat and tried to attack the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister grabbed the armband off the assassin and then stabbed him in the back with a knife. The assassin fell out of the helicopter and rolled down into the snow. Karcsi thought it through. The children in the training photos, the orange-banded kid with the scratched-out face, the helicopter. It all happened at the same time he was in the Alps. Maybe he met the assassin and didn't even know it. Maybe it was one of the girls in the chalet. Maybe it was anyone. Falling out of a helicopter must have hurt. So the assassin, he must have been injured. He couldn't remember seeing anybody injured on the mountain. Then the man in front scrolled further, revealing a photo of the children training. This time, the orange-banded boy's face wasn't scratched out. It looked strangely familiar. Karcsi leaned closer to get a better view of the photograph on the man's phone. But two things happened at once. Karcsi knocked the man's arm, causing him to turn, and he saw a clear view of that child. Karcsi stumbled back against the window of the carriage. The man with the phone looked at him, then back at the photo, and then back at Karcsi. Without waiting another second, Karcsi turned and ran out of the buffet carriage, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of the train and the clattering utensils faded behind him as he sprinted down the narrow corridor, and the realization of what he had seen driving him to escape as quickly as humanly possible.